going on, guys? Zers here, and then today we're talking about the male gaze theory. So, what is the male gaze? Well, I swung over to Wikipedia and let's read this out, see if we can have a good criteria to start us off in this philosophical discussion on the male gaze. The male gaze is a concept coined by feminist film critique Laura Movie. It refers to the way visual arts are structured around a masculine viewer. It describes the tendency in visual culture to depict the world and women from a masculine point of view and in terms of masculine attitudes. The male gaze consists of three different gazes. 1. That of the person behind the camera. 2. That of the characters within the representation of film itself. And 3. The gaze of the spectator. So, very important thing we need to understand about the so-called male gaze is that the male gaze in feminist theory does extend a little beyond that of movies. So today we're going to chat about movies and a little by extension the male gaze as it is internalized by ladies. We're going to gloss over that one as well towards the end of the video. So right now we're going to focus more on the male gaze in the film theory. Right. Now, the very important thing that we must understand about the so-called male gaze is that as a concept, it does exist. In the same way any abstract concept exists in reality. Right? In the fact that some films are indeed filmed and recorded with the intent of having men be the target demographic. This is absolutely 100% factual. That's true. Some directors and some movie production companies and the people creating movies do, for some films, make films that are targeted towards a specific demographic. So that's the very interesting thing about the male gaze. Feminists are complaining that this is widespread and that this happens all over the time and that this very seldomly happens to women and that they have the female gaze and that some movies are recorded and designed to pander towards a female demographic. Well, factually, that's just not true. And in fact, that's just a straight up lie. There are lots of films that are shot with a female demographic in mind. Plenty of them. However, feminists are more primarily talking about films that have a male demographic that are supposedly supposed to represent or be marketed towards a more general audience. Well, it's actually very easy to tell different type of shows are dedicated to different type of demographics of people, just not only based on the story but the characters in there and the amount of fan service that you get. So for those of y'all who do not know, fan service is a term that's primarily associated with manga and anime, and that a lot of the time female characters are oftentimes shown in revealing clothing, or sometimes they'll get naked or something will happen to the females that will pander to the male audience, and because a lot of these female characters are pretty cute and you'll get to see them naked or in skimpy outfits, and some characters are oftentimes called fan service characters because sometimes their entire point in the entire show is to just be a sexy lady to titillate the men, and feminists have an issue with that. It's a strange issue that it is, and I'll get into that in just a second, because you have to also understand that the male gaze does then extend to video games as well, and the fact that this is indeed true. Lots of female characters in video games are designed to be athletic and look very attractive. This is again primarily speaking towards games that are marketed towards a male demographic and are action-oriented games. So logically it would make sense that these females' bodies would be very attractive and athletic and lithy. I think lithe, is that the word to use? I could be using the wrong word there, but the point is that these female bodies are created to be very athletic and slightly muscular. Not as muscular as male characters for obvious reasons, or obvious logical reasons. So yes, lots of sexy athletic female characters exist in games. Of course, again, this does extend to men as well, and the inverse, well, the opposite would be the female gaze, in that there are lots of sexy male characters with big pectoralis muscles and abs and all of that too. So the truth of the matter is, the male gaze is not much of anything special. It's more just a roundabout way of saying that in movies, lots of attractive people are there to pander to the fantasies of both men and women, depending on who the target demographic of that product is. So, yes, again, that's the first thing you need to understand. It's just a roundabout way of saying human beings are attracted to other human beings, and directors and filmmakers will use this to their advantage when they're making a film that is targeted to a specific demographic. Right? Very important that we get that out of the way. Now that we understand the fact that it does indeed exist, one thing we need to talk about is the fact that it goes both ways, which I've glossed over in the first part of the video. The fact that both men and women are shown in very sexy poses. It's just that the poses for men and the poses for women are oftentimes very different, because contrary to popular belief, men and women are different. So in other words, the male gaze or the male gaze theorists would oftentimes note the fact that a lot of women's midriffs are shown, that their butts are zoomed in on, their bust is oftentimes zoomed in on too, because those are the different things that men find to be very attractive. And since the film director or the creator of the video game wants to capitalize on male sexuality, they will accentuate these different type of sexual markers on men or on women, and they'll do the same thing for women when it comes to men, because oftentimes, again, the poses for men and what make men sexy are different, right? So a lot of women, as far as I can tell, aren't really thinking so much about men's hip to waist ratio, unless that guy is really big or fat, which again, that's something primarily men look for when they're looking for fertile women. Women are looking for men, they're looking more for status indicators, they're looking more for strength indicators like big biceps, big chest, abs, which is why you'll see a lot of shirtless guys in a lot of different shows and in a lot of different movies. A lot of shirtless guys are there, which is very strange. Again, how can these feminists complain about the male gaze theory when you see an equal number of shirtless men in a lot of different movies? For example, I'm going to use examples for two different movies. A lot of feminists love to bring up the fact that in the first Transformers movie, right, for all of, 13 seconds, the camera zooms in on Megan Fox's breast and her abdomen. Again, for all of 10 to 30 seconds at the most. It's not even that, it wasn't even that sexually explicit of a scene, really. And lots of feminists like to bring that up to show you that this male gaze certainly does exist. Well, a lot of these feminists don't ever like to talk about Twilight, New Moon. The fact that nigga Jacob was shirtless for about 70% of the films that he was in. I mean, come on. Female gaze. They're pandering towards a female demographic. That's why there are a lot of shirtless guys in Twilight, but you don't see a lot of fan service from the women. Why? Well, because their target demographic was women, and since, let's be real, the vast majority of women are heterosexual, they're gonna have a lot of shirtless guys with some nice abs. Same thing for the target demographic is mostly men. Gonna have women with nice butts and nice boobs and, good hip to waist ratio. So again, basically, movie companies and different type of video game companies are capitalizing on the fact that men and women are attracted to each other, and depending on what they're trying to sell, they will use that to their advantage. And feminists have a problem with this because they say that this is objectification of women's bodies. Well, that's a very strange thing, this whole objectification bullshit. Not only the fact that objectification happens to men as well, but it's really different kind of objectification with women and men. I made a video about this a long while ago. It's not a very popular video, where I talked about objectification of men. But before we get into that, let's talk about the objectification of women. We not only have to admit to ourselves the very real fact that women choose to objectify themselves, we also must admit that objectification for a woman is the farthest thing from disenfranchisement there ever fucking was. I mean, seriously. An objectified woman is as far from disenfranchised as the king of a country would be, alright? Or maybe that's a little too extreme, but hopefully you get the analogy here. An objectified woman has a great degree of power. A sexually objectified woman. If that woman is not chained up to, to be sold as a sex slave or anything like that, if she is in control of her own objectification, she is incredibly powerful. In fact, she has the power of manipulation. And that's the most important thing about the male gaze that we need to understand. The fact is, the male gaze is not used to disenfranchise women. The male gaze does quite the opposite. It actually reveals the fact that women completely control sexual power. Well, I won't say completely. I mean, men do have the option to just not have sex with women, but go say that to some other guys and they'll have a right argument with you about how men can't control themselves around female vagina. I've had arguments like that, legitimately. I'm not making that up. That being said, getting back on track, that's one very important thing about the male gaze. It is an example of female power and privilege in our society, or that of an attractive woman. Feminists do love to talk about the male gaze as if it is somehow disenfranchising, and that any form of objectification of a woman is somehow removing her agency from her, which again is the farthest thing from the truth. Because a woman who knows that she's sexy and attractive understands her power of manipulation over men, and is probably using it to her advantage. In fact, one very interesting thing that you'll notice even here in video games is that is exactly what the female fighters are doing, especially when they fight male fighters. See, in reality, women are not created to be combative. They're just not. Let's take that as a given. All right, women were not created for combat. Okay, so when you have female fighters, you'll often notice that they are very sexual. Of course, part of that is, again, pandering to the male demographic, because most women aren't playing fighting games. Of course, there are some, but again, if we were to look at the demographics, it's mostly men who are picking up these fighting games. And you will see that a lot of these female characters are overtly sexual. And the reason why is because within the context of the story, outside of the marketing, in our reality, these women are playing on the sexuality of the men that they're fighting. Most men aren't really want to fight women and are easily distracted by breasts and cleavage and whatnot, which is why women are oftentimes on Instagram or even just walking around in everyday life showing off their cleavage, because they know it's going to get them some fucking attention. They know it. This is also why advertisements also will use women's cleavage. Again, it's taking advantage of male sexuality to not only try to obtain the approval of women, but try to have sex with a woman, because most men want to make women's lives better. Do you know why microwaves exist? Because a man wanted to make his wife's life easier. Same thing with washing machines. It's kind of a desire for most men, right? And these female fighters will dress in a sexy manner with the intent to try to, distract the man while he is fighting her. In fact, there's actually one character, what was her name? Killer Bee. I think it was Black Orchid, or Bee Orchid, and the Killer Instinct franchise, right? Where her No Mercy, which was pretty much the equivalent to a fatality in Mortal Kombat, but she would just unzip her shirt, show off her cleavage, and she'd kill the people, right? Like, her boobs were so magnificent, it causes men's brains to fucking explode, and girls were so jealous of her cleavage or her boobs, because she fully exposed herself, they just gave up. Another example of a female fighter who's using her female form to her advantage would be Mai Shiranui. Mai Shiranui, I think you pronounce it, where, I forgot what video game she was from, but she's a red ninja. I'll link a picture down below, right, where she is, literally in a position where her boobs are, jiggling back and forth, again, with the intent to distract you. In fact, that's actually historically accurate, because a lot of female ninjas did actually play on the fact that they were women in order to get out of bad situations and manipulate the men into having mercy on them. So that's accurate. I mean, women for thousands of years were taking advantage of their sexuality, right? And again, these marketing campaigns are taking advantage of female sexuality too, the same way female models are doing it. Because again, we have to understand that women are choosing to be objectified. And even then, the state of objectification, it's actually rather difficult to completely remove the inherent value of another human being without some level of dehumanization, right? I mean, even if you're saying a woman is a woman, you are acknowledging that she is an autonomous human being, that she is a person, which is why I don't understand why feminists always are like, women are people too. It's fucking dumbass. Anyway, the mere fact that the woman, now if a woman understands that she has that power over men, she's the farthest thing away from disenfranchised, right? And in fact, here's the thing about it. Like I said, the male gaze extends past just movies, right? So when we end up this part of the video, what is it? The male gaze is actually a great example of the fact that females have a great degree of sexual power over men. The last thing that needs to be discussed about the so-called male gaze is the fact that feminists say, or some feminists will say, that women in general internalize the male gaze and that they see their bodies as objects that should be decorated for the pleasure of men, or something along those lines. Now, here's the thing. I won't put it past them that some women probably do have really low self-esteem and are probably using the attention from men to make themselves feel better. Like, I've seen this. I mean, just go to the Gone Wild section on Reddit. Like, that's all that is, really. So, yeah, true. Women are certainly looking to sexual attention to validate themselves, right? But, that being said, it certainly really doesn't have much to do with the male gaze or the so-called patriarchy, as it kind of has to do with the fact that women want some dick. I mean, women want to have sex. Shocker. Plot twist. Women want to get some dick from men. Who would have fucking thought, right? Who would have imagined that women want to get some penis? I never knew that, man. I was just always kind of wondering, how people came to be. I mean, come on, like, really. Yeah, women want to have sex. It's such a stupid phrase. It's just a dumbass thing to even have to say. Like, no shit. I mean, that being said, which is why this is going to be used to close the video out. Again, the male gaze is just another roundabout way of saying that men are attracted to women. And women want to appeal to men because women want some dick, right? So, it has nothing to do with the patriarchy, as it just kind of has to do with being a human being. The male gaze, even then by that extension the female gaze, because again, you can see a lot of sexy guys in a lot of different TV shows. I mean, for example, the Vampire Diaries is a show that is very clearly marketed towards women. It's pretty much a female, it has a female demographic. And how can I tell? For a long time, the main character, one, was a woman. Two, most of the show's plotline is about a woman having options between the guys she can date, which is a female fantasy a lot of young ladies have. Ladies like it when guys fight over them. They really like that shit. That's how I can tell, just from the plot line. Second, there's a lot of fan service. I mean, you can see a lot of shirtless guys in the Vampire Diaries, and even though I can see it, and I know the show is demographic as women, I still enjoy the show for the plot. I can see that, right? Which again is the same thing that a lot of feminists and some ladies don't seem to grasp the concept that even if the target demographic is men, that doesn't mean that they're ignoring you, and it also doesn't mean they are objectifying or disenfranchising women. It just means that they just mostly want one demographic and they do the other. The last thing that needs to be discussed is, for some odd reason, feminists don't seem to grasp the concept that a sexy woman can simultaneously be attractive and she can be an important part in the story. In fact, if we use Black Orchid in the Killer Instinct series, in the terms of the story and in the confines of the game and the universe, she's actually the strongest fighter there, and she's the main character. So, she is the farthest thing from disenfranchised, even within the context of the game itself. Again, Black Orchid is the strongest character in the game. I mean, she may not be the best to play, but strongest in terms of the storyline is what I'm saying. So, again, feminists don't seem to grasp that concept, that you can be sexy and you can be the main character or an important character in a film or comic book or movie or TV show or anything. An inherently sexy woman is not disenfranchised because she's sexy. In fact, she is the farthest thing away from disenfranchisement. And that is the most important thing about the film, about the male gaze film theory that I think we should all take away from. The male gaze, once again, is a perfect example of the inherent sexual power that women have over men. And once again, is the farthest thing from disenfranchisement for women there ever was. So, like I said, I'm going to have to talk about the male gaze one more time in just a straight talking format, because it's a very important thing that there's some things I've left out here, but I think the video is long enough as it is. So, with that being said, man, I certainly hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, man, go ahead and click that like button. Go ahead and click that subscribe button, comment box below, and as always, have a great day. I will see you cool cats soon. Adios.